Good evening. Welcome to Talk Gnosis. Tonight we are being joined by Bishop Craig Williams, and we are also being joined, as typically, by my co-host, Bishop Peterson. Greetings, Bishop Peterson.
Hello.
Pretty excited about our guest tonight, Bishop Craig Williams. He was an author, looks like, of a brand new book, Cave of the Numinous. Pretty excited to get right into the contents of this. Greetings, Bishop Williams. How are you?
Good. It's great to be here with you guys.
You know, I think I want to kind of start this conversation right away with, even the title of your book. I got to tell you, that's not a very common word in the English vocabulary. I had to do a little bit of research. It looks like it's actually kind of popped around right at the beginning of the 20th century. Can you give us a little bit of even a little bit of definition on Numinous and why you use this for the title of your particular book?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, this is the volume 1 of a tantric physics series. So we'll probably have 3 or 4 volumes expanding these ideas. And the first one, Cave of the Numinous, had a certain key factor we want to talk about. But to me, the idea of the Numinous implies a whole mysterious world. We tend to think of the realm of the soul as just, perfectly happy all the time, or something that's just only mystical and magical in a very positive way. But the Numinous can be something which is terrifying, and in a good way. It terrifies our conditioned mind, breaks down our preconceived notions of who we are, so that we can transform into something greater. So I think that was the base foundational idea, that the Numinous is something mysterious that no matter how much we try to define or rationalize, it will always remain something strange, which is good.
Interesting. Could you give us a little bit about your own particular background?
Yeah, the idea of expounding something about tantric physics, an idea that David Beth and I had years ago, talking about an idea of kind of expanding within the system of cosmic gnosis, an idea of Indian gnosis. And my background is extensive in India and studies with Chinese medicine and Indian Gnosticism, I would say, which would kind of convey everything from Tantra, yoga, Vedanta, Jyotish, and the system medicine from India, Ayurveda. In India, all those things are intertwined. In America, they're kind of broken up into different systems, but in India, they're all intertwined together. So I kind of wanted to bring that into my Gnostic studies and have some kind of pathways that you could travel between worlds, where you could navigate different geographies of thought in a respectable way without diluting the tradition. Because I think that's a challenge today for us to visit other cultures metaphorically or in person without diluting the tradition.
I think that's extremely important. One of my pet peeves is sometimes that people will kind of interject, a little bit of this, a little bit of that from various cultures or traditions, but it becomes so watered down, it no longer even resembles the tradition that it comes from. It is, I may pee off a lot of viewers on this, but it's kind of one of the things that have always kind of upset me with many of the quote-unquote New Age types of spirituality, is that things become so diluted, it doesn't even resemble that. So I really kind of appreciate that. Another question I have here for you is left-hand path. That comes up in some of the things reading about you and about your book.
Yeah.
I think depending upon, one's particular perception or one's particular esoteric or occult school, the left-hand path can mean different things, even be interpreted as different things.
Definitely.
Some would think of left-hand path, I think comes to mind for many, is something dark, sinister, evil, black magic. Others would almost say it is something that is more matriarchal in system, that disregards the kind of a patriarchal system and kind of goes towards the idea of like the divine feminine or the divine goddess. And there's probably a gazillion definitions in between. How do you define the left-hand path? And kind of specifically, within the tradition that you're working?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's something that I'm usually very passionate about speaking, because I think that term left hand too has just been completely diluted. You know, we tend to see the idea of left hand being some kind of license just to be a fool, or license to have as much sex as you want, drink as much as you want, and then they'll even bring up, you know, avant-garde social figures which have been a little bit maybe perhaps charismatic or out of control, and then try to call them left-hand path. From an Indian perspective, I think you're right in one aspect. The left-hand path would be a path where there was more of an emphasis on the goddess, on participating in that. But it's also particularly a path which sees the physical body as an alchemical alembic. It doesn't see the body as something which holds us back. Rather, it sees the body as a gateway into the Numinous. So the left-hand path would seek to balance the mind and the body together, and not seeing it as something which is fighting with each other. So in some cases, that would be taking care of your body. And that would mean that you would have to be more fit and more healthy than the average practitioner. But it also would mean that you weren't a slave to your body, that you weren't addicted to certain things. So you were rising above certain substances. It's about transforming your senses, essentially, so that your senses become gateways for transmission and gateways for communication. And to do that is a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And to do that takes a lot of discipline, and it takes a teacher, and it takes specific techniques. And that's why they refer to it as a dangerous path, because it is dangerous in the sense that people can get lost. But I think it's not necessarily dangerous unless someone just is walking their own with no teacher, or two, is walking a fake left-hand path. Then it's dangerous.
You know, I was wondering, Bishop Williams, when I was reading some reviews about your book, there's a lot of talk about finding a guru, finding a teacher.
Sure.
And as we all know, I think that's very important, but as we also know, there are a lot of fake gurus and fake teachers out there that are very willing to exploit people.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on what people can do to find a genuine guru, a genuine teacher?
Yeah, I think that's just like anything else in the world. I mean, particularly, I can speak from one real practical, mundane example would be finding a good doctor. I mean, it's very hard to find a good physician who will take the time to listen to what you're saying, pick their head up from a computer screen. But one can do that. It might take some work. It might take going to some bad ones first, but they're still out there.
Right.
I think, to me, it's quite odd that people have trouble finding teachers today in a world where we can connect with people more than ever. We can connect with people instantly. We can communicate with people instantly today. In other ways, it was very, very hard. So I think, number one, there are a lot of teachers out there, but you have to actually get out and find them and talk to them. You have to close your computer screen, travel, actually meet people one-on-one. And then you actually have to kind of cultivate the mindset of a student. We tend to look at teachers today as products, as something that you can buy, that has to meet your satisfaction guaranteed expectations, has to fit what you want from it within the first 5 minutes, or they're done. And that just, if you have that mindset, which is, I usually sometimes call it like a commercial mindset, or we commodify human beings as a product that we can own. If you have that mindset, it's going to be very hard to find a valid teacher. Because
I think that's a really good point right there. I mean, I'm sure Bishop Peterson could testify to this, but I know just from my own experience, you know, sometimes you'll run across the student who almost wants you to kind of bend to what their wants and desires are, doesn't really want to learn, but if you're not basically willing to do things upon their terms and their conditions, they almost feel that you're not doing an adequate job for them. So, you know.
No, absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt, that's a huge, huge issue. So I think it's a complex situation, but then in many ways it's not complex. So.
Do you think, particularly with the left-hand path, where you are perhaps traveling down different paths or pathways that you're not used to, that may make you uncomfortable or whatnot, the importance of the teacher is probably even greater in the left-hand path because you have to have something external working on you?
Without a doubt, yeah. Particularly with the left-hand path, the actual physical teacher and the physical initiation is vital.
Yeah.
You know, without that, there's no astral teachers or astral initiations in the left-hand path. If there are, it's a quite foolish idea.
I would think so, because you can't, I know we do these video shows and I communicate with a lot of people online, but even when I'm talking to somebody through the video, there's a lot I don't see. I don't see them in multiple dimensions. And we were talking, I think, before the show about the importance of physicians that actually look at their patients, and that's hard to find these days, because you're seeing a person moving, their whole body is moving. You can, you can smell them, you can see them, you can hear how they're breathing, and you can't do that even online. And it would seem to me that that would be really important for a left-hand path teacher or any teacher where the body is an important part of the spiritual work, because they've got to pay attention to the body systems of the student, it would seem.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on.
Yeah. So, I'm interested. I know that you're an acupuncturist. You do Chinese medicine as well, and I'm always really fascinated by that kind of integration, because I think of the way a lot of Western medicine or a lot of Western practitioners operate is that it's your body and that's it. Your spirit. Spiritual development, that you go to a chaplain or you go to a pastor of a church or whatnot, but they're completely divided. But you've also mentioned that, for example, when a person is on this path, the guru will prescribe diet, for example, in use of herbs or whatnot, or
particularly, I mean, within India, the whole idea of Tantra was interweaved with the system of Ayurveda. And the system of Ayurveda would recognize distinct physical types, distinct mental types. And so if that was the case, then they would be prescribed that just to have an overall sense of balance before one even started the path. But then perhaps during the path, certain imbalances could happen. I mean, if someone is doing everything from basic meditation to intense ritualistic practices, something can happen. So if that happens, they might be able to see that, tell them certain things to do. You could adapt your diet in harmony with both the seasons and your body type. Then the transformation becomes a little bit more, I don't want to say necessarily more comfortable, but it comes just more integrated in the sense that the transformation can happen, because transformations are always messy.
Oh yeah, they always are.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to ask you, would a tantric teacher ever deliberately introduce a regimen or a dietary change or whatnot that would create an imbalance in the student for a specific reason? They would create an imbalance so that the student would have to figure out how to write it or would have to have that experience?
I'm sure someone could. I mean, there's definitely a lot of teachers in those kind of situations. I think particularly with students who think that they know everything, would probably do that just to throw them a monkey wrench, because I think now, I mean, everyone knows everything. Everyone's an expert. Everyone knows more than you. Everyone's had more experiences than you. Everyone Googles everything. And so now everyone claims to be that, but then when you actually put them into the fire, then we'll actually see what happens.
Right.
And then you can lie on the internet, but you face to face, and you can even lie to a teacher for a certain amount of time, but then eventually it'll show through.
Absolutely. We're going to be taking a break pretty soon to get into our next show, but one more question I've got for you real quick is that, we've been discussing to a degree, the ideas of Tantra, and I think, that in itself kind of evokes kind of a wide spectrum of imagery to many of our listeners, because I don't think many understand. Some of it comes through the lens of many of the Western mystery traditions. There are many Western mystery traditions that almost imply that they have various keys to various tantric practices. But how does the particular system that you work with differ from many of those that we see within kind of the Western lens of viewing Tantra?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, definitely my system of Tantra and the system of Tantra that we use, for example, within even, let's say, esoteric Buddhism, would definitely trace it back to a system from India, or what we would maybe even back then call Southeast Asia, before it was even called India. And so from that, I would definitely tie it into Vedic, although people argue back and forth about what Vedic means. I define it clearly in my book when I use the term Vedic, what that typically means. And so in the system of even esoteric Hinduism, it's definitely going to be all traced back to India with that. And then, I mean, we see that with most Western traditions when they're using a tantric thing. They're, I mean, in not 90%, but a lot of the cases they're just taking it from India. And so I mean, even a Western tantric tradition would be suspect for a lot of reasons, and because initially one of those teachers is going to have to be tied back to some Southeast Asian tradition, whether it was Tibetan, Buddhist, Hindu, or all the above. So for me, it was always important just to go to the source. That's why I went to India to study there. So.
Well, I think we'll be continuing this discussion in our podcast of Talk Gnosis After Dark. I want to remind our listeners, if you've enjoyed our show and if you have found it helpful, please visit our Patreon page at Patreon, which is patreon.com/Gnostic. You can pledge a small amount per video or per podcast. You can set a cap for this, and it directly supports this show and the development of new programs. Bishop Peterson, you got any exciting news for our listeners?
Well, we do. November 30th, I know our own Father Tony will be on the Voices of Modern Gnosticism panel in Boston. And if you want to get more information about that, you can go to Bishop Williams. Oh wow, it's going to be a great time out there. If you want to get more information, you can go to http://bit.ly/Voices of Gnosticism, and you can find out more about that incredible panel. Also, just a reminder, on October 4th, I will be speaking at Crucible, which is a convention of occultists and esotericists that takes place each year in New Jersey, Princeton, New Jersey, actually, and I will be speaking on developing divination questions. So I would love it if you could join us for that, and I'd love to meet you. So, yeah, that's our news for this week. And I want to thank everybody for joining us for this great show, and we will be following this with Talk Gnosis After Dark. Just a reminder, if you are a Patreon subscriber, you will be able to, you have one of your perks is being able to watch us videotape that live, and that's a lot of fun. Otherwise, it should be online in about a week, and you can find it at talkgnosis.gnosticnyc.com, also on Stitcher and on iTunes. So once again, thanks for joining us, and do send us your feedback, your questions, your ideas for shows. You can find us online on Facebook. You can also leave comments under the YouTube video, or send us an email at talkgnosis@gnosticnyc.com. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.